Hello, everyone, and welcome to Winged Victory with Rob and Scott, a podcast by the National Museum of World War II Aviation here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And here are your hosts, Rob and Scott.
Welcome. I'm Scott Clares, and once again I am joined with the formidable
partner in
Gale.
crime.
And today we have a very special guest. I'm very excited about this. If you've been at all involved in the warbird market in the last 40 years, I guarantee that you've either heard of him, talked to him. If you needed a part, he's the guy to go to, Mr. Bill Barclay.
Well, what an introduction. I don't know if I can measure up to all that.
Well, I guarantee you can.
Thank you. But I will say what a pleasure it is to be with you two. Been a great admirer of the podcast so far and watch that develop as your team here, William, and you two have really kind of come into your own on that. It's been very cool, very cool to see different people within the organization and the things you've done. So I'm very humbled to be here with you guys today. It'll be fun.
Yeah. I got to tell you, Bill, you were the first guy I thought of when we decided to do this podcast. And,
did you not know very many people around here? Yeah, no, that's great. I'm looking forward to talking to you guys.
And alluded to you when I think in that first podcast we were talking about the people who find the pieces to keep these airplanes going and to restore them. Yeah. And you seem to have, I'll just call it a gift.
Well, and I can tell you, I've known Bill, dude, I don't know, 40
since you were
years,
a kid,
it seems like. Yeah, almost the entire time I've been around any of this stuff.
Absolutely.
And you're not going to find anybody that's got anywhere near the same extensive knowledge of warbirds. In general, he is the go-to guy around here. I kind of feel bad because I use him like an encyclopedia almost. It's like I could go to the book and I could spend 45 minutes trying to figure out, or I can go, hey, Bill, dude, what is this part? Hey, Bill, dude, how did you do this?
By the way, not an encyclopedia.
That's right, Dudopedia.
Yeah, Dudopedia.
Yeah, there you go.
Dude Bond.
But we lean on him very heavily around here, and we couldn't do what we do to the extent that we do it if we didn't have him doing it.
Well, he's been kind enough not to throw at least this docent out of his office for asking dumb questions either.
No dumb questions.
And there are.
So let's kind of start from the beginning. You got into this very, very young, at a very young age, and how did you even get to that point? Just to be a kid. How do you
absolutely
get lost in Chino someday?
Well, and it took a little bit to get there. Everything in my life has been a bit of a fight. It's never come easy. My dad's father and my dad's stepfather both worked the P-38 line in World War II, Burbank. And I was really around my dad's father, my grandpa, a lot. And he had a great love of country, and he was always into airplanes, He said that he used to fly Jennies. Now, I will tell you that he probably flew in Jennies. I don't think he was ever a licensed pilot or anything, but he had all kinds of great tales, some probably somewhat true and others pretty far from true. But I don't know, I can remember being 6 and 7 years old and just being in love with World War II fighters. And learning about them, and he had an old scrapbook that he kept during the war of all the ads and different things, and I can just remember sitting in his little single-wide trailer in Pomona, California, and the thing was immaculate, not like you say today, I lived in a single-wide trailer. No, the thing was just mint.
No, that's when Pomona was something.
It was something, yeah, and just for hours, and I still have that book at the house. And so the big thing, we wake up early if you're staying there, and we'd have to go take care of all the old ladies' trailers, rake leaves and do things. Like as soon as the sun was up, get up, let's go. And but in the afternoon, Grandma had soap operas coming on, her stories, he called them. So let's get out of here. And we would go to either Brackett Field.
Oh my God.
And then eventually we found Chino. It took a little bit to figure that out, but we did. And in those days, you could just drive around airports, So I can remember, early on, Brackett was cool. I had a T6 at Brackett, and I thought that was cool.
I may be getting older than I am, but I remember a black P-38 at Brackett when I was a kid.
Well, I can tell you about that. It'd be a little off subject, but yeah, there was actually 2 P-38s at Brackett. And the short story of that, one of those ended up being the Plains of Fame airplane.
Oh, wow.
And a gentleman named Phil Wallach, very famous for taking pictures and just everything, great guy. His dad was in the police department there in Pomona, so he kind of filled a lot of backstory for me early in life. But like I say, we start getting off on these tangents, and we'll be here for 6 or 7 days. But yes, they
Fine
were
by
there.
me.
By the time I was there, this had probably been 76 kind of time frame, so I'd been about 7 years old. And the P-38s were not there, I can tell you, but there was a T-6 down there, and I just enamored with that. But once we found Chino, and you drive onto that airport, with all the old World War II hangars, and even driving down there, it was very much agricultural, you know, a lot of cows, and of course Scott remembers that, and you remember that, being a SoCal guy. So you could smell it, you know. We used to say when we were flying back, you know, how do you get back to Chino? You just follow your nose, you know, when you're flying. So, but it's cool driving on there, and there's like B-25, and of course Aerosport was still very much going then, in one of the big round topped hangars there. And I can remember going up the door, and they had it just open a little bit, and 2 rows of Mustangs in there, like all the way down, probably, I don't know, just a guess, 12 Mustangs in there. And that's what they did. That's all pretty much they worked on. And then there was a shop a little further up, a little later on. Bruce Gessling had a shop. And of course, you know, skipping way ahead, later on, they were building like F-104 in there, and A-4, a bunch of different things, Mustangs in there as well. So the whole airport, and then of course Plains of Fame was there as well. But a lot of private owners, a lot of airplanes just on the ramp.
Yeah, it's kind of a warbird mecca, really.
It was,
still
and it still is, I mean, but truly amazing. So now, you know, all these scrapbook pictures and all these thoughts in my head they're coming to life, you know, and
the real thing.
You're like, wow. And I can just remember standing at that door, first time I saw a Corsair, of course, my favorite airplane, and they had it in there, and Soup, who was running Aerosport, his Uncle Bob, I know you know Uncle Bob, it's his uncle.
Bob Nightingale.
Yeah, Bob Nightingale, that's right. You know, he was working there. He had a partner named CP, and you know, who I met later. And CP let us in. They had big stairs going up, so that was the first time I got to look in a Corsair. I want to say it was like a Dash 4 or something. So you know my opinions on that. I don't know if a Dash 4 is a real Corsair because it has a floor in it, and the pedals hook up correctly. So you know, that's almost too normal to be a Corsair. Yeah, it's almost too normal.
Yeah.
So, but that was cool. And then, of course, after that, then anytime you're with Grandpa, it's like, let's go to Chino. That's all I want to do, go to Chino.
Yeah.
And, so you do that, and then in the meantime, it's right about the time Baba Black Sheep's coming out on TV, you know. And in those days, you didn't have cable and all these choices.
3 channels.
Yeah, you know. And so, you know, all of a sudden, every week on NBC,
You're watching your favorite.
you're watching
airplane.
Corsairs, and I'd get my models out and fly them around in the living room, and Mom and Dad just shook their heads, and you know, because they weren't airplane people at all, you know, at all. And so they're just like, well, whatever. And I guess I was about 12 years old, and found out that you could volunteer at the museum. A guy named Gary Lynch, met him going in there. You know, your son was with my dad. You know, you can volunteer down here. Boy, that's all it took. And you know, we went from there. It was a bit of a struggle to get in there and get started, but once you did, boy, I'd love to tell you, we went right in and started learning about airplanes. We did. I think they want us figured out. If you're a kid down there at that time period, you know, do you really want to do this, or are you just being a kid? And so I pulled weeds. I mean, my dad couldn't get me to pull weeds at the house to save his life, you know what I mean? And now I'm pulling weeds, and I'm happy about it, and I'm painting fences, and I'm, you name, you know, cleaning toilets. I mean, just the bottom of the bottom.
Yeah.
Anything
stuff
to
that
be
doesn't
there.
even need to be done. They just give him something to do
Yeah, give
while
him
he's
something to
here
do.
that we don't have to pay attention to.
We
him,
don't
right?
have to pay attention. So that's kind of how it started. That's when I met Alan, of course, and Robbie, who was just out flying our stuff for the Coleman documentary, and all those guys, you know, Steve, and they were already all my heroes, because at that point in time, then you figure out there's air shows at Chino. So they used to do an air show. I want to say, you know, like our air show was when I was down there, was in May. And there was like 70, I want to say 78 and 79, I'm sure some of the viewers will correct me, but they had Gathering of Eagles show, and that was in August. I remember being hot. but I've never seen so many warbirds. I still haven't. And you're a kid, so maybe it's bigger than in your mind than it was. But it was a huge CAF show, a huge Planes of Fame show, and private owners from all over the country. And I can just remember walking up and down rows of airplanes. And of course, Black Sheep's going on, so they got all the airplanes from Black Sheep there. And there's a picture with me and my cousin, one of my friends from first grade, standing in front of the Planes of Fame Corsair, which, of course, years later I would be the crew chief on and run and, take care of and do all of that and fly in, because we ended up eventually put a back seat in that. But so pretty surreal, 7, 8 years old, standing in front of this thing, and then years later, I'm sitting in it and running it. I was like, that's pretty cool,
Yeah.
I wish I could tell you I was flying it, but can't tell you that.
No.
But I've flown in it all over the country. So, really cool. And then I'm all in by then. You're just in high school, junior high school. All you want to be is a Chino, and then all the things associated with that.
Yeah.
Flying in airplanes, the Reno Air Race is huge for us, being West Coast guys. Oshkosh was never really a thing in the time I was there.
So about what age did you start getting to get involved with the airplane part of it?
Well,
you started out at 12, you say, or
yeah,
so.
about 12, and it wasn't every weekend at that time, because it was about a half hour. I grew up in Glendora, California, so it was about a half hour, But I would say by 13, I was in there being a helper, and it got to the point to where once I got done with my jobs, cleaning oil pans and doing whatever, then I could go in the shop and the boys would teach you stuff, clean parts and pack bearings and maybe shoot a rivet. I don't know, just stuff.
Yeah.
You're kind of a helper. And by the time I was 14, hopefully we don't get Steve in trouble for this, but Steve actually came up to me.
Statute of limitations.
Yeah, statute.
By now.
Steve-O's running the shop now too, so Steve-O wasn't alive then, so
Yeah.
he's out. Him and Jane are safe. So I just about to turn 14, and Steve come up to me and he says, "Hey, what are you doing this summer?" I don't know. He goes, "You want a job?" "Yes," was the answer. No hesitation. Not how much are you going to pay me? What does that look like? What will it entail? Yes.
Just yes.
Yeah. And what it was $40 a week cash under the table. And then I would give Dad $20 a week
To drive you.
to drive me to and from Chino. So $20 a week. And, when you're that age,
That's
with your
money.
racing Scott and, you're a sponge. You just soak it up.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, these people from like the original Chino kids, which was pictures in the programs of the Gathering of Eagles of all these youngsters, those were my heroes. As soon as I saw those airplanes, and now I'm in a building full of my heroes.
Yeah.
And they're all old. They were in their 20s.
Yeah.
I don't think Steve was 30 yet. Jim Maloney, of course, who we lost in '83. But and I was an only child and very sheltered, and you would never know it, but very sweet kid in those days. And all of a sudden I have, 15 older brothers and an older sister in Karen who I must have just drove her nuts, because we'd drink beer at night. That's what you did, 4:30. It even said on the clock in the shop, said beer 30. So at 4:30, everybody $5. And Robbie or Jim would drive up to Mars Market, which was just up the street there, beef jerky. And in those days, it was Michelob Light, because they had sponsored the Red Baron Air Racer, and later it became Bud Light because they sponsored us on the Super Corsair. But so drink some beers, and then Karen got wind of that, so no more beers for me. 14 years old, drinking beer, so that didn't go over real big. But I got in trouble for that a few times. But so it was fun. But it was hard, we rag in the shop.
15 older brothers.
Yeah,
it was a different time.
And I just, you hear some of the volunteers, you rag and say, "Man, you're harsh." I'm like, you don't even know. This is not even close.
Yeah.
So what a great experience, to really help you develop as, and of course you're a teenager, so you're, you know everything, right? I had some different words for that, which I normally use.
Yeah.
And so it humbled you, but it taught you, all sorts of funny things like that. And some of those stories, get my hair cut by Lefty, and, and you know, getting my sunglasses squished by Johnny Maloney. Yeah, just things like that. You know, and just, you know, of course you're a kid. My parents are getting divorced. I'm crying. You know, oh, look at the baby crying. You know, it's like, you know, dang, you know, you can't win. So
no, that's how you learn to be a man, though.
Well, I'm working on it. Yeah.
Well,
56,
we're all works in progress.
Work in progress. You bet. So yeah. So it was really cool, and you know, even to this day, you know, that's still, even though I'm probably the redheaded stepchild now, that's still family to me. And because you're young and you're impressionable and you're a sponge, and you get thrown into arguably the best warbird shop in the world at the time. You know, you think about the talent that was in there, and the people that were there now that are still there.
Yeah, it's been a continual thing.
And there's you know, most of them are still out there doing it, and so quite honored to, you know, it's not like you started some shop and then you build up and then go to the best. No, you right to the best.
Yeah, and it's not like it's just a shop either. I mean, you guys are doing flying all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
All the time. You know, learned how to tow airplanes before I had my driver's license. So I can remember, I was always cheapest guy, kind of still am, you know, but, you know, like we did a Mustang, we called them tuner rides, but revenue rides. And I mean, we fly the Mustang probably at least 3 or 4 days a week, sometimes more, sometimes multiple days on a Saturday. I don't remember what the cost was for going for a ride. I've fortunately never had to pay for a Mustang ride. So, but yeah, I was the guy that would tow it out, pre-flight it, you know, get the guest strapped in, get them all set, and then whoever was going to fly it, Johnny Maloney, or later Kevin Eldridge as he got into fighters, or even Alan did some rides, you know, and way later John Hinton and stuff, but he wasn't quite to fighters, I don't think, by the time I'd left there. But yeah, so you get it ready, or got gas and ready to go? Yeah, it's ready to go. And they just get in, away it go, and then they come back and, you know, they do their thing, do a couple pictures with the family, and then, you know, then I'd call the gas truck or do whatever, and then put it away. And so yeah, pretty cool. You know, you think about that now, right? What a Mustang costs.
Oh,
can you imagine some 14-year-old kid with no driver's license towing Mustangs and Corsairs and stuff like that? We didn't care.
Well, yeah, you guys had a whole backyard full of stuff that you could just pull from, or, you know, if you needed to fix it, or.
Well, you're a kid. It doesn't even make it to that level.
Well, the thing is, too, is, I mean, that, you know, really Plains of Flame was kind of like run by kids. I mean, it was kind of.
It was, yeah. They were youngsters.
I mean, Steve was a kid when he started. And,
absolutely.
You know, I mean, all these guys. Yeah. So I mean, it's not like you had a bunch of 50-year-olds start the thing and then look at the kids and go, well, nobody could touch any of this stuff.
No, it was.
I mean, it was.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Especially when Jim Maloney was alive. He had a dynamic and a personality that and his little brother Johnny, who was later a partner with me, you know, on the airplane here when we bought the two L5 projects. I mean, it was fun. I mean, we played with remote control airplanes, U-control airplanes. We'd play baseball. We had a basketball court out there, well, kind of, and had an overhang on it. And Johnny he would throw it up and it would bounce off that overhang, and it would like slam dunk the thing. I would just get out of the way because the ball was doing about 1,000 miles an hour. All right, I'm out, you know. But we just had fun, like
well,
kids
said, it was a lifestyle. I mean, you guys were living there
7 days a week.
You know, I mean, literally, guys were, you know, Mage would be living there.
Mage was living in that shed out there. Yeah.
You know, and it was just a bunch of ragtag kids that
in the 80s,
had a love for flying.
We all a bunch of airport
what they wanted to do.
We wanted to be around the warbirds, and it goes without exception. And you know. Yeah, but truly my heroes. And you know, I told Robbie when he was out last time, I said, you know, you guys were my heroes when I was a kid. And I said, still are, you know, you still are. So yeah, pretty cool. So kind of grew up and then kind of grew into a mechanics position through high school. I had ranged my schedule at high school to where I could bail out at lunch usually. I had like ceramics and lapidary and things like that after lunch. Hey man, I'll come to class twice a week or something.
Yeah,
get out of there.
Just give me the D so I can move on.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. No, I get pretty good grades, but yeah, you know, it's. But we got down there, so it was good. And obviously by then I was making a tiny bit more than $2 an hour, fortunately, driving the little Saab car down there, you know, every day and having fun and what an experience and the true heroes in aviation that, at the time, being a kid, you don't fully grasp that. All these World War II heroes that are gone now.
Yeah.
You know, the true heroes of these airplanes, you know, and the people that were that age, you know, and save the world. You think about that, you know,
Yeah.
how many people can really say that? All kids, oh, I'm going to change the world, I'm going to do this, do that. No, these kids, these youngsters, literally save the world.
Yeah.
And so
After
you're seeing them as old people and things like that, but so you appreciate that more later in life. But you know, Saburo Sakai, you know, Greg Pappy Boynton, you know, Bud Anderson, Tex Hill, yeah, all of those guys, you know, and then some under the radar guys. We had a volunteer there named Carl Carlson, and we were just talking before we started up about you guys talking with Ashby about being a flight test guy and stuff. Well, he was a flight test guy right after the war. You know, he'd flown Mustangs and things, and he was flying
these jet-powered things.
Yeah, right. And so they're trying to figure out how to fly P-80s and stuff.
Yeah.
Out at Muroc, you know, later to become Edwards, and he was a guy. There was another volunteer in him, and he's kind of an amateur woodworker, and they built the fuselage for a little 30s air racer. God, what was that called? It was an 8-ball. I forget the name of the manufacturer.
GB?
No, it wasn't a GB. No, but anyway, they were building the fuselage and just talking to him one day. Oh yeah, you fly. Oh yeah, I flew during the war. Oh yeah, great. Oh yeah, what'd you do after that? Oh, you know, I was test pilot for a while. And he opens up his wallet eventually after, you know, he didn't say much. You know, like most of the real guys, they didn't say anything. And so he pulls this little card out of his wallet, and it's all these experimental airplanes that he was rated in. And it was like the one that they had, you know, not like something he put and just kept in his wallet. It was the real deal. And all these airplanes. Do you know Chuck Yeager, you know all those guys? Oh yeah, I knew all those guys, you know. I said, well, what were they like? And, you know, hanging out at, you know, you hear about poncho bombs.
Yeah, right.
Oh yeah, that's where they go drink and hang out and party and some crazy stuff there, let me tell you. And, you know, from what they say. And so you're just a kid and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And then it goes from that to, you know, I told you the other day I had good fortune to give Pete Law a call. And all these original Skunk Works guys that were big air racers, Bruce Boland, Ray Poe, all those people were in the shop. You know, Tony LaVere spent a lot of time in the shop when we were building P-38s down there.
Speaking of test pilots.
Yeah, right. And, you know, I just can't even tell you. And, you know.
And so while you're in the middle of it, are you really able to grasp that? Or is this something, like later on in life, you're just like, oh my God, wait, I did do that. And I was around that.
Yeah. At 56 years old, you know, you look back on that and go, God, I wish I would have taken time. You know, I mean, we got some stories and this and that, but I mean, you know, no. Yeah. To that, no, not at all. But like to that point, every day at lunch, this is, like I said, when Jim was still alive and stuff, and even a little later, you know, Frank Sanders, you know, he's gone now. He got killed in a T-33 years ago. But his son, Dennis, and still runs Sanders up there in Ione, and Frank, we call him Dad, right? Because that's all Dad used to say. Dennis would always say that, and his brother Brian, Dad used to say. So Dad would come over in this full-size van, and man, you had to haul butt to get in that van because Frank would honk the horn a couple times, and if you weren't in that van was going to lunch. and we'd be going, and Frank had one eye, and he did a wonderful Sea Fury show. And he is an old racer, you know, air racer, of course, too. One of the original air race guys from the 60s and 70s when that all started coming back. But he had drag racer and everything else. And so we're doing about 90 in this van, right? Going up Euclid. It's still farm country in those days, but going through traffic, you know, and I'm in the back just hanging on for dear life, like, oh my God. And this is like every day. It's not like once. Every day. And he's over his shoulder, you know, talking to you with one eye. So it looks like Marty Feldman. He's got one eye going up here. And he's telling you a story, and we're going through traffic and go to Del Taco. Every day was a different place, you know, Graciano's or Del Taco or this or that. And, you know, I do have a great story about this. This is a little later on, but we're in the van going to lunch. And Bruce Boland and Pete Law, like I said, original Skunk Works guys. And they were sitting in the very back row of the van. So it was a bench seat, went all the way across, and they had a little, you know. And so they're talking about UFOs.
Oh, okay? Really?
Oh.
Talking about UFOs, no kidding. And everybody's jabberjawing and talking, and we're through the traffic and whatever. And pretty soon the van's getting quieter and quieter and quieter. Because if anybody knows about UFOs,
those guys,
it's going to be those two guys. Because they would always complain, I got to go out to the ranch. Well, later on, you find out that the ranch is Area 51.
51.
Right? And so pretty soon we're dead silent, and they're talking, and they're kind of in hushed tones back there. They're very engaged in their conversation. And then they figure out we're all quiet. And they just stop, and they look at us and kind of smile and just shut up. So the question is, and I should ask Pete, next time I talk to Pete, I should ask him, were you guys really talking about UFOs, or was that just to mess with us? I could see Bruce especially, Bruce Boland, he used to, and he was pretty much a structural designer. You go back to the not Sheldon, but Greenemeyer days, that. He designed all that stuff. And then Pete was a systems designer and all that. So the Super Corsair, the Red Baron, you name it, all of those airplanes, fast airplanes, Bruce pretty much designed those, and then Pete would do the systems. So, and to this day you wonder, and just, I mean, even up at Reno, meeting like Bob Love, looking at that guy. That guy's like the real deal test pilot. I mean, he was like on a Wheaties box in the 60s or something, and he's racing Mustangs up there, and, just the amazing people that you met.
Yeah.
It's staggering. It's staggering.
Well, and I kind of can echo that a little bit. Just
Absolutely.
My time. I mean, I spent a very small amount of time at Chino, but every time that I would show up there as a
go
kid,
down there with
you
your
felt like
uncle
you're on
and
hollow
stuff.
ground. I
Yeah.
mean, it really did feel different.
Yeah.
Especially being based out of Rialto, and you're like
little community.
You go from this little, it's like dirt, trailer.
Puddle jumper.
You're talking single wide trailers, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what it felt like at Reno, and
absolutely.
then it felt like you're going to Beverly Hills when you'd hit Chino.
But
I mean, it's just that juxtaposition,
of
what it was like, because
Absolutely.
I didn't know anybody out there, and you drive around, and then you'd be driving, and you would see a hangar open, and you'd be like, "There's a P-40 in that hangar."
Yeah.
Who's that? Oh,
Yeah.
that's so. Well, that's not Planes of Fame. No, that's just so and so
just
has
so-and-so.
a P-40.
Yeah,
or,
absolutely.
Aero Trader, or all these places. They're just. And then you get in the backyards, and you're like, "Oh my God, there's so much stuff here."
Yeah.
It was mind blowing for
Yeah.
me at the time, and it wasn't even what it was when you were a kid.
No, it was probably a little more, but but still the feeling is still the same. I haven't been back there in many years, and Steve especially has been telling me when he comes up, flies for the show and stuff, my old boss, and he's like, "Man, you wouldn't even recognize the place. They got all these, big concrete tilt-ups around the airport, and it's not what it was. It's open farm country and just full of warbirds." And if you think back to Chino, of course it was a training base during the war, a Stearman base. So I always feel very fortunate that I was able to get my pilot's license there when so many of those young men in the 40s learned to fly there. And then all that entails, and then where that would go. But all that stuff was there, so you were immersed in World War II history just being there. And then, of course, after the war, it was one of the country's largest scrap bases. And, you'll see in Michael Leary's magazine, Air Classics, once in a while, Gary Larkin would go down there back in the day. And just from those eucalyptus trees, Scott, you've been out there, and you have too, Rob, and all the way to Euclid, basically, just rows and rows of airplanes. There was a movie made, I believe in 1946 or 47, called Best Years of Our Lives.
Yes.
Okay, so the very closing sequence of that is Chino. Yeah, when they got the B-17s and they're cutting the engines off of the B-17s.
And
guy
Dana
gets
Andrews
in there,
is in the nose.
Yeah, so and later on when we figure this out, when we're in high school and stuff, and we would wait until all the adults left, and then we'd get the tug and the little Jeep trailer, and with Jim Martinelli and some of those guys were down at Pacific Fighters, and now of course Jim is the head of the warbird operation for Erickson Collection, but we'd go out at night with go get a pack of beer and drive around out there and just start digging holes, and we would come up with stuff,
all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah, because they were cutting stuff up there.
It was actually stuff that you used.
Yeah, and both of the Flying Heritage airplanes, the little adapters for the flare guns, they were doing some hangar construction out there, and they had a big pile with a big, warning sign around it, some sort of ecological disaster or something,
And you're like, no,
we just wait till after work, and And I was working for your dad then, but you know, I had my severance package, which was the Chino gate card. That's what I used to call my Chino gate card, because it worked for about another 10 years after I was done working at Fighters. So use your severance package and go in there and dig around. And so yeah, both the little flare gun adapters that go on the side of the fuselage. I know you've put them in before, Scott, and it kind of flare gun clips in there, and the pilot could shoot it, right? Shoot the little disc out the side of the fuselage, and then obviously the flare would follow. But yeah, both of those came out of the pit at Chino, and you know, they're all burned and everything else, but so we straightened them out a little bit, and Dave got some springs for them, you know, in our shop, Dave Gallup, and we put some, you know, sent them out and got them parkerized up, and yeah, they're still in those airplanes, that Thunderbolt and that Mustang, and that's right out of the dirt in Chino. So yeah, pretty fun. Yeah.
So how long were you out at Chino?
A little over 10 years, in total.
Okay.
I worked for Steve from 84 to 93. And then, so that was great. But like I said, if you volunteer from 81, so a little more than that. Yeah.
And then you worked with Chuck Wentworth for
I
a little
did,
bit?
yeah. That's, so when I left Steve's, and I guess it's no secret, we got a little slow, and he had laid a bunch of people off. We were a big shop at the time, and I was still there. And he came out one day with tears in his eyes and said, you know, you're going to have to probably take a couple months off. We're waiting for some P-40 wings to show up from Stephen Gray. And so once they get back here, you come back. And I'm like, you know, 23 or 93, I'd have been 24. I'm like, man, I can't afford to take a couple months off. And he's like, well, and he's crying. So I don't know if, you know, I didn't know what to make of that, because it's the only job I ever had. And so anyway, I guess long story short, we left there, and I went to work the next day for Bob Nightingale on Ross Deal's T-34 project. And I did that for a couple days, and then drove up to see your dad and Alan, and just, hey man, I'm gonna just go cruise around. And actually I had kind of had a deal with Bruce Lockwood. I was gonna go to Santa Monica, David Price's collection down there, just to be a mechanic. Yeah, I was a mechanic. I wasn't a scrounger in those days or nothing. And just, you know, like you, trying to be a fabricator.
Yes, you were a scrounger already.
Well, no.
Story of the pulling stuff out of the pit.
Well, that was later. That was when I was working for his dad.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but no, we were just, it was something for us to do, and you know, it was pretty cool. We, you know, a bunch of kids living in a gated community. So, and, yeah, we had to run from the cops a couple of times back on the airport, but we never got caught. You know, so we tried to keep our activities in the confines of the airplane. And we never messed with the airplanes. We did have one rule on that, so we never messed with any of that. But we did have a lot of fun. You know, who can knock the cone over while we're all sitting out there drinking beer, and you know, how fast can you get, you know,
the tug to move.
Woodman's pink Volkswagen to hit the cone without knocking it over, you know. So he'd start on the other side of the taxiway and probably doing 80 or something, you know, and we're sitting 5 feet from the cone, you know, and he won. He got it to swing one time and it stayed up, so he won. You know, just stuff like that. But yeah.
So you
I went
turned
on,
up.
Yeah, went on and went to Wentworth's. That was about a week later. I went up to see Bill and Alan, like I was saying, and I found a damaged engine mount on your dad's bomber, you know, and hey, you know, hey, I think this, oh yeah, that's broken, you know. So did that and went to lunch, and then Alan goes, hey, have you talked to Wentworth yet? You know, he's got that Corsair over there. And I told him there's nobody around that knows more about Corsairs that's available right now. So yeah, I drove over there and made a deal with him and started the following Monday. And it was challenging working for Chuck, but you know, he gave me a job when I needed it. You know, his company was called Antique Aero, and so they really specialized. He and Tony Furukawa were in there, and they would build World War I airplanes. And I, of course, being that age and knowing it all, I call them sticks and twigs. So you guys work on the sticks and twigs, and I'll work on this Corsair. And then Chuck had a, you know, rough around the edges TBM, and so we'd work on that a little bit too. Yeah. But yeah, so it was great. So I did that for about a year and a half, and about that same period of time, you know, your dad and Alan had that Mustang, which you had good fortune to ride in.
Yep.
And that
First
was
Mustang.
I think your dad covered that, the trade with Bob Pond for the Tiger Cat project and all of that stuff. But yeah, so they had the Mustang, and you know, as you know, they ended up trading that, not to rehash old stories. So they ended up trading that for a Crash Thunderbolt. And I'm just amazed, number one, that one of my great friends, and but a mechanic at Fighters,
owns a Thunderbolt.
And that's bitching, right? I mean, that is awesome. So I would leave work at Chuck's shop at like 4:59 and 30 seconds and drive across the north-south runway over to your dad's hangar. And I would spend a couple hours every night working with Alan primarily. You know, your dad's always got other stuff going, but he was out there too. I remember working with him on the belly down there and stuff, but mostly Alan and I, would work together, and I'd sit there and complain about working for Chuck, honestly. Just because he looked at things not from a warbird, a big warbird kind of mindset. So, there was some challenging conversations and things in there. So sometimes I'd complain. It's not to take away from how fortunate I was to get that position. And he's still alive, he's still going. And that guy could fly anything. I mean, he could fly these folding chairs around the pattern. The guy's amazing.
Well, he had an engine fall off and held on by
right at the Reno Air Races, and there's a picture in that book.
And he still landed the thing.
Yeah. I said, how did that go? You just ride that thing down? No, I flew it all the way to the ground. I was going straight down, but amazing. Yeah, that thing was called the Flexi Flyer, as I recall. The Formula One, the Flexi Flyer. Yeah. And that freaking engine,
it flexed right off.
Yeah. Man. So, just stuff like that. And but another very accomplished aviator and, very much a team member with Art Scholl out at Rialto. And, of course, I know you worked for Judy there for a while. And
my first job.
Yeah. And got your license down there.
Got fired. Only time I ever got fired. No, actually, I didn't get fired. I quit. But
Well,
I think Kevin wanted to fire me more than a few occasions.
Kevin Cameron, you bet. Yeah. Anyway, so anyway, but they were kind of always together and did a lot of the film work together. They did like Iron Eagle, things like that. And of course, when Art was lost, filming Top Gun, Chuck was actually flying over the top on that, and there was an undercast that had come in and couldn't recover. But unfortunately, Chuck had gone out as a flight of two and had to come back by himself on that. But it was a great experience for me because it was really just me building this Corsair and where at Fighters, you had all these people and you could really lean. It was me. It was me. And so that was great. And what a wonderful experience. And Chuck he really is a good guy. I just, I can't say enough about it. And so working at night with your dad and Alan, I'd be like, man, I want to work over here. And all of a sudden we got a beautiful hangar that your dad had built out there and way nicer than Chuck's. And, and they're like, man, we don't have enough work hardly for ourselves right now. Yeah. And time went on, and the Thunderbolt was making progress, and a guy named Larry Rose, he's a crop duster out of Imperial, California. He had a Corsair at one time. What turned out to be the Flying Heritage Corsair now, but it was pretty untouched. I know your dad had talked about that Corsair a little bit, and there's a little more of a backstory than your dad alluded to on that. But a great airplane, really stock. And so he had that. And then he had some other warbirds, T-28. But he had bought this, he talked to your dad, and we ended up getting a T-6 project for him from a guy in Northern California. And so they got that T-6 in, and I was over working on a Thunderbolt. And Alan said, you still want to come over here? I said, you bet. He said, Bill, we'll talk to you later. And that was in December of 94. Probably mid-December. And so sure enough, your dad come over and we talked a little bit. And I'm not having employees again after the construction company. So a contractor, okay, or whatever. And made our deal and started with them, with Bill and Alan at Claire's Aviation.
Yep.
Wasn't Westpac in those days. Started with him January 1st, 1995 was my first day at work. And on New Year's Day, but as you know,
we work.
There's no such
there is
thing
no
as holidays or sick
no
days.
Such thing as a
working
holiday.
for your pops, So we started, and then it was the three of us for a while, and then your uncle Larry Clares, who's the oldest boy of the three Clares boys. you know, he was working at Carl and Tony's. He was actually working on Pat Harker's bomber down there, and they were like 16 at the time, and so he was working on that. So we were getting ready to go to Pearl Harbor to do fly off with Carl Vincent. Your dad and Bob Lombard had sent that up, and so we got a bunch of airplanes. Your dad did, and went and did that. And Larry and Bob went on that trip with us as well. And then as soon as we got back from that, Larry started on with us, and that was a great addition. He's very talented.
Yeah, I learned a lot from him.
Yeah, absolutely. A great painter, as you know, and you know, fabricator, all those things. Of course, he was, unlike your dad being a pipe fitter, was electrician, like your Uncle Bob as well, and your grandfather, right? So all electricians. Yeah, great guy. So we brought him on, and then a little while later we brought on a guy named Sam Pennington, who in the '92 carrier launch, which I was fortunate to go on as well, even though I was still working for Steve, Mark Foster and I got to go on that. You know, we brought the guy who flew the other airplane off, and it was a guy named, God, I forget his first name, but his last name was Crow, and then Sam, so we brought Sam on, and they had flown Poopage's B-25 off. So we brought him on, and so yeah, he worked with us for a couple years, and it was, I mean, we really had to kind of scratch it out. I mean, we didn't have much. I can remember Larry bringing up some of the ag planes. I think your dad made mention of Melsheimer, a real shining light for your dad, somebody that he could really lean on, a mentor for him, and a great guy. You know, he had that B-25, and so we were able to give that a pretty extensive annual. The thing was pretty far out of rig, and you know, needed a lot. And then we even worked on that Bushmaster, which ended up crashing later at Fullerton. You probably saw the film of that.
Yeah.
And you might have too, Bob.
I remember that plane being at the hangar.
Yeah, and that thing was pretty rough around the edges. So, and we did a lot there. And kind of funny on the Bushmaster, you know, the call sign instead of like a C-172 or something, it was a BU-2000. I just think that's great. A BU-2000. Is that a vacuum? What is that? No, it's this tri-motor right here. Yeah. So we worked on all sorts of stuff.
So you get scratched. So you're there and you're working, and then you guys get hooked up with FHC.
Yeah.
So that kind of, I think, is probably the moment that you really start to take everything, your knowledge, to the next level, because you really got to start building airplanes.
Yeah. It's kind of a little bit of a voyage to get there, but at the time, Paul Allen was starting out with Flying Heritage Collection, and they had a number of projects in the U.S., different shops, down at Azell's down there in Breckenridge, and at Fighters they had.
They're kind of spread out all over.
Yeah,
the world,
had stuff
really.
all over, and at the time we'd just gone to that 4-day work week, Scott, and I found that working a 10-hour day on a ladder or something, it was just too much for me, and so I had actually, you know, started thinking about going back to school, which I eventually did when I turned 30 to get my bachelor's degree. But because I was thinking, well, I'm going to have to do something, you know, because I can't do this. And about that same time, Flying Heritage needed somebody with a background with all these shops, knew all the shops, and then was a mechanic, but they needed somebody to handle what we would call government furnished equipment, or GFE, so hardware, you know, line marking material, decals, data tags, just the kind of
the total minutia.
Yeah, I mean, mundane, kind of just normal stuff.
What kind of plating does this bolt have?
Right.
You know.
And so it really, your dad also talked about it in his podcast, but it really kind of raised the level for all the shops.
Yeah.
And you know, my opinion is, in most circles, that's still the direction most people want to go. Most of the newer collectors and stuff, they want it to be friendly, but yeah. So with that, they needed somebody that had that background. And so your dad come out to my bench one day and he goes, man, you know, we need somebody to do this. You know, do you think you'd be interested in that? And, you know, I'm an okay mechanic. I'm far better at the job I do now, but I think, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know. But I said, let me think about it. I went home and I contemplated for a while and thought about it. I'm like, you know, this would be cool. And it'd keep you off your feet and it keeps you in the game.
Yeah.
You know, and we were still taking care of the Bomber and the Thunderbolt long before museums or any of that. So we're still working on airplanes at night and in the evening. So I'm still got my toolbox and still doing things. So it's like, it was kind of a good match, and it took some time to kind of grow into that position. You know, how do you write a purchase order? You know, I'm an airplane guy. You know, warbird guy. Well,
so up to this point, you're collecting all this information throughout your entire life
that you don't even realize you're collecting.
Were you collecting
yeah.
it? Were you basically at this point just learning from other people, or were you going home at night and reading stuff even before all this?
Absolutely. No, I would take the manuals home. You know, and airplanes of fame in those days, not a lot of airplanes were super stock, but yeah, you'd still take the manuals home.
So it's just continual absorption.
I had the good fortune to go to the air races and things, and have a whole air racing kind of a career as well, a little bit of a career, I guess. But get around Reno time, and you work on the Super Corsair and Mustang. So yeah, you take the manuals home for sure. When I got that position that your dad offered to me, and the group at Flying Heritage, and thank you for that too. What a wonderful opportunity. I would take the hardware books home, things like that, and really immerse myself in that, knowing that was going to be, what we needed to do. We needed to build something that we as a shop, and most of these shops we were working with, really hadn't got to that kind of level.
Well, they hadn't realized that they would need that just yet. It just kind of evolved, didn't it? I mean,
it kind of evolved, but I mean, they came in pretty much from day one. Jeff Thomas was kind of the honcho up there that we worked under at the time, and he pretty much made it clear that they wanted something that was super stock. They didn't want any patches. If I had a patch in it, want a new skin, this and that. But they wanted high shears in a Mustang wing, and at that time everybody was putting high locks in them, which is the follow-on to a high shear. But we had to figure out how to do all that, and what does that mean, and what's an oversized high shear, and where do you get them, and what collars do you use, and just all this stuff that you had to address. So, and I was kind of leading the way on that, or at least a big part of that. And then working with all these different shops was really cool. Chad Azell, who took the shop over for his father when his dad got injured, Nelson Azell. I've known Chad, I think he's a year younger than me. His older brother Ashley is the same age as me, and he's of course a honcho at American Aero Services down there at Norville's place down there in Florida. But Chad runs a shop now. I mean, I've known that guy since we were 14, and so you're talking with this guy, and we're kind of growing up together in the business. And so a lot of things like that, calling Carl and Tony. Heck, I've known Carl and Tony since I was 13 years old. And of course the big quest in my life, being a parts guy and a GFE guy, and this working with Tony, that guy can read a manual and recite it back to you, line and verse, chapter, very deliberate. And my quest in life was always to stump him on something. And right before we left Rialto and Flying Heritage kind of, moved on from us, I was able to do that. I called him up and I said, well, it was some hardware that he needed for B-25, for the Flying Heritage B-25. Well, you want the, and it was North American language, so they had all their own standards for screws and bolts and things. So I think it was something like a 7S2, which is an NAS 221 screw, panhead structural screw. And so I was like, well, I need this and this. I said, well, you want the this or the this or the this? And there's silence. Builder, just get me what I need.
And that's as much satisfaction as you're going to get.
Victory.
I was like, all these years, Tony just telling you, and it was right, the guy was that good, just with all of that stuff, and finally
so you've gone your entire career building airplanes for other people,
absolutely,
and doing the hardware and getting forming all these relationships, and then you decide, hey, it's time to have one of my own.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a bit of a story too, as always. As you guys can already tell, I can talk. So yeah.